Stars, Secrets, and Marshmallows, written and narrated by Christina Chang. Cataclysm. Cat Noir's voice rang out strong and clear against the cold, empty streets of Paris. He leapt up and pressed his hand against the thick tree trunk dangling precariously over the power lines, causing it to crumple and fall into a blackened heap on the ground below. An eruption of applause followed as the surrounding construction and electrician workers cheered in relief from not having to maneuver the large obstacle on their own. Cat Noir saluted them with a grin before jumping nimbly over a nearby building and ducking into the alley below. Closet! He stretched out his hand for the small black kwame that emerged from his ring and shivered slightly before handing him a smelly chunk of cheese. The kwame took it eagerly before narrowing his eyes as he took in their dismal surroundings. Adrian, why are we in a dark, cold alleyway when we could be comfortably at home surrounded by luxurious warmth and a delightful supply of cheese? May I remind you that your father has 3 or 4 large generators perfectly capable of outlasting this power outage? It's not us I'm worried about, Plague. Marinette lives on the street. Even with the tree out of the way, it'll be at least a day or 2 before they get the power back on, and the sun's about to set. I want to make sure the Dupe and Changs have everything they need for the night. Looking down, Adrian saw Plague had greedily swallowed his last mouthful of cheese. Since you're all done eating... Plague looked up in alarm. Adrian, wait, I still have some stuck in the corners of my cheeks. Adrian shook his head with a mischievous smile. Come on, we both know you already swallowed it whole. Plague, claws out. He stretched out his arms as his t-shirt and jeans were replaced with shiny black leather, then pulled out his stick and made his way toward Marinette's house. Normally, the Dupe and Chang bakery was open to customers at this time, but now the normally bright storefront was dark, with the tinted glass catching the final rays of the sun, making it impossible to see inside. Cat Noir stood in front of the bakery, staring intently at the closed door and shifting uneasily as he debated what to do next. Should he go in? Should he knock first? His cat ears twitched at the sound of a loud crash from inside, quickly making the decision for him. He burst through the door and found Marinette with her back towards him, kneeling on the floor, picking up the small cardboard boxes that were now scattered around her. Relieved that she appeared to be unhurt, Cat Noir tucked his stick into his belt and crouched down beside her. Need a helping paw, Princess? He asked with a grin, using the nickname he'd given her on the day they met. She looked up at him in surprise, suddenly aware of his presence. Cat Noir? What are you doing here? He helped her to her feet, then joined her in collecting the boxes off the floor. Well, I heard there was a power outage on this side of the city and wanted to make sure everything was okay. She smiled as she layered the boxes over her arms. Oh, you checking in on all the citizens, kitty? She paused, then looked back at him. Wait, wouldn't that take a really long time? Well, not all of them. Just some as I was passing by. Actually, he hadn't thought of checking on anyone else. The only thing on his mind had been making sure Marinette and her family were taken care of. Sabine walked in and Cat Noir straightened with a small bow. Good evening, Mrs. Dupe Chang. I was just checking to make sure you have everything you need during this power outage. Oh, that's very thoughtful of you, Cat Noir, but you don't need to trouble yourself about power outages. She helped unload the boxes from Marinette's arm and set them in a crate off to the side as she continued talking to him. You and Ladybug do so much for the city already, and the people of Paris are very resourceful. You superheroes don't have to carry everything on your shoulders. This isn't our first time without power, and it probably won't be the last. We can make do, though I appreciate your generous offer of assistance. Her voice was kind, but Cat Noir felt the heat rising in his cheeks, and he took a step back with a sheepish smile. Well, I guess I should be going then. Wait. He turned back and saw Marinette had finished filling a second crate with boxes stuffed with leftover pastries and slipped into a thick winter coat. I could use your help delivering these to the homeless shelter a few blocks down, if you don't have anywhere else to get to at the moment. Cat Noir smiled appreciatively. She seemed to have sensed his awkwardness and was giving him a way out, whether it be with her or to somewhere else. It would be my pleasure. He took the large crate from her and she picked up the smaller one that her mom had packed earlier. Remember to keep a watchful eye as all the lights and traffic signals are still down, Sabine called, beginning to light a few of the candles sitting on the countertop. We will. Cat Noir held the door open as Marinette stepped outside, then followed her as she led the way to the shelter. It's It's really nice of your family to donate all these scrumptious treats to the people living at the shelter, Cat Noir remarked as they headed down the quiet street, the last streaks of sunlight peeking softly through the growing shadows surrounding them. Well, we'd have to throw it out anyway, even without the power outage, and it's nice to know that people will still be able to appreciate it. Marinette set her crate down to adjust her coat, her nose and cheeks already slightly pink from the cold. Brr, this is way too cold for March. It never fails. Just when you start hoping for spring, it slams you with another 3 weeks of winter weather. She shivered. Are you sure you're fine coming out here without a jacket? Well, my suit keeps me from getting too cold, and I guess the magic of it protects my face and head, too. Oh, I forgot about that. Must be nice to be perfectly warm all the time. Well, it does help me stay positive. She shook her head with a laugh and picked up her crate as they started walking again in the direction of the shelter. The door tinkled with a friendly greeting as they stepped inside the dark open space at the front of the shelter. Cat Noir's night vision quickly kicked in, but there were several lanterns and flashlights casting bursts of dazzling white light against the walls, enough that his eyes adjusted back to their usual color scheme. He carefully followed Marinette as she led him to the place they were to deliver their crates and showed him where to unload the boxes. To his surprise, she didn't just leave the treats at the counter, but took a few trays and began handing some of the treats out to the people clustered in the shadowy hall. He watched with admiration as she graciously made her way through the small crowd gathered there, saying hello to this one, giving some muffins to that one, making a light joke as she passed another. She seemed to have taken special care in getting to know these people, and the way she handled herself with a gentle confidence and genuine sweetness reminded him of why she was his everyday ladybug. It wasn't long before people had taken an interest in him as well, thanking him for his service and asking small questions about how he was doing and whether he liked the same band as them. It was almost an hour before they had finally excused themselves and made their way towards the exit, but being able to lift their spirits simply by spending time with them had lifted his heart as well. He looked over at Marinette, who was struggling to get into her coat, but from the brightness on her face he knew she felt the same way. "Allow me." He untwisted the coat from behind and held it steady as she slid her arms into it. "Tired of waiting for me to figure it out on my own?" Cat Noir shrugged. "You know a hero like me can't resist aiding a damsel in distress." Marinette rolled her eyes with a smirk. "If fumbling with a coat is your idea of distress, you must be a pretty busy guy." "Only around you, princess." He immediately wanted to take those words back, as he wasn't sure how she'd interpret them. She gaped at him, then folded her arms with a suspicious look. "Are you saying I can't take care of myself?" Cat Noir chuckled slightly. "Of course not. When you put your mind to something, you're one of the fiercest people I know, and I have no doubt that you're perfectly capable of handling yourself." She nodded in satisfaction, though he couldn't help adding, "Except when it comes to coats, apparently." She spun to face him, mouth open in protest, but her angry look quickly faded into a cheerful laugh that washed over him like a summer breeze. "Well, I guess even the strongest of heroes can have weaknesses." She stepped closer and brushed her shoulder against his with a sincere smile. "Thank you, my noble kitty." He winked as he pulled the door open for her, and she gave a mock curtsy before passing through. They stepped out into the normally bustling city of light that was now almost pitch black with only the light of the stars, and quiet except for a few distant voices drifting on the wind. Marinette was about to trudge on when Cat Noir grabbed her arm and pulled her back. "Wait, are you sure you can make it back to your house in the dark? I don't think you brought a flashlight, and your mom said to be careful." Marinette put her hands on her hips with a careless scoff. "Please, I've been walking this route since I was 2, and besides, I know the city like the back of my hand. In fact," she tilted her head down, but he still caught a glimpse of her eyes as they twinkled mischievously in the starlight. "I bet I could get there faster than you." She took off running, leaving him stunned for a moment, before a wide grin spread across his face and he began racing after her. He started to close the distance between them, but Marinette still had a full head start and was charging fearlessly down the darkened streets. She threw him a teasing look over her shoulder. "What's the matter, kitty? Can't catch up?" He was about to respond when she let out a sharp cry and crumpled to the ground. He rushed over to her and found her cradling her ankle while her face was tightened in pain. "Are you okay? Is it broken?" She shook her head and took a deep breath, though her voice sounded strained. I don't think so. Just sprained it a little, I think. Stupid pothole. She turned to glare at the source of her discomfort. Cat Noir tried to suppress a laugh as he knew this was not the right time, even though she was adorable. Would you like me to carry you back to your house? Marinette hesitated, then slowly got up with a determined look on her face. Thanks, but I should be able to manage. She winced as the injured foot touched the ground and quickly shifted her weight to the other leg. Are you sure? She nodded, though she clung heavily against him as she draped her arm over his shoulder and let him steady her waist as she tried to balance her weight on her good foot and only slightly touch the ground with the other. The going was painfully slow as they had to keep stopping every few minutes for Marinette to catch her breath and regain her balance before moving on. Cat Noir would offer a word of encouragement here and there, but for the most part they were silent as Marinette was keeping her focus on the ground in front of her and wincing slightly whenever she made a bad move. After a while they stopped again and Marinette leaned into Cat Noir, moaning slightly. Are we almost there? He let out a small laugh. Marinette, I hate to say this, but we've barely made it down 3 blocks. Her head shot up in dismay. Seriously? She looked back over the way they had come and realized she could still make out the distant light of the lantern shining through the shelter windows. She sighed dejectedly. Fine, please carry me, Cat Noir. I'll be out here forever if you don't. With a nod, he gently scooped her up over his arms, holding her close but being careful not to aggravate her foot. He decided against running or jumping over the rooftops for fear of jolting her ankle more than it needed to be, and instead began a steady walk down the city street. Marinette was quiet, and Cat Noir couldn't help but feel something was off. Was it just the pain in her foot keeping her from speaking, or was he making her uncomfortable by carrying her this way? She hadn't seemed to mind in the past, but maybe he'd done something to offend her? Sorry to be so much trouble for you. Her face held a smile, but her eyes were downcast, and her tone held a trace of embarrassment as she avoided his gaze. So that's what was bothering her. His heart lightened, and he was amazed again by how thoughtful she always was of others. He let her feel the shrug of his shoulders and squeezed her a little tighter as he said, Well, now I can say I helped the damsel out of some real distress this time. That reawoke the playful spark in her eyes. She smirked and said, Are you sure you weren't just saving yourself the long walk back with me hobbling along? Cat Noir pretended to be offended. Princess, I assure you my intentions were nothing but selfless. She pulled her arms tight around his neck as she rested her head back down on his shoulder. I know, Kitty. Her voice had grown softer and rang with sincerity. You really are a noble knight to me. They walked on in comfortable silence, and before long they'd reached the bakery.